Welcome to another deep dive. We're really getting our hands dirty today with this one, huh?
Haha, yeah, I guess you could say that.
We're digging into lebo101.pdf, and trust me, this isn't going to be like that dry botany class you slept through in college.
Not at all.
This is about getting up close and personal with the wild ways plants make more plants.
Right. It really makes you appreciate the sheer ingenuity of nature.
Okay, so to kick things off, let's talk flowers. I mean, they're pretty to look at, sure, but the text mentions something about flowers being, well, designed for sex.
It's true. What we see as beauty is, from a flower's perspective, all about reproduction.
Okay, so how so?
Well, you've got the androecium.
The what, im?
Endoecium, that's the male part. And then there's the gynoecium, the
Yeah.
female part.
Yeah.
And these two parts, they're like the key players in this whole botanical dance.
I like that. It's like every bloom has this whole drama unfolding within it. So for this drama to work, we need a little action. Bring on the pollen.
Yes, pollen.
Tell me everything.
It's more than just, those yellow stains on your car in the spring or whatever.
Or the thing that makes you sneeze, right?
Exactly. But honestly, when you really think about it, pollen is kind of this incredible feat of nature. Like, did you know scientists have found pollen grains fossilized from thousands of years ago?
Thousands, really.
Yeah. It's all thanks to this substance called sporopollenin.
Spora what now?
Sporopollenin. It's this super tough material that protects the male gametes inside the pollen. That's how we can survive for so long and travel so far.
Wow, I had no idea pollen was so tough. Like it's like a tiny time-traveling machine carrying plant DNA.
Exactly. It's really fascinating.
So while all this pollen is out there on its mission, what's going on the female side? You mentioned ovules earlier.
Right. So inside the ovary of the flower, you'll find these structures called ovules. They each have this thing called a megaspore mother cell.
Hold on, megaspore mother cell. That sounds pretty important.
It is. This cell goes through meiosis.
Meiosis, that's like, it's like when cells divide and shuffle up the genetic material, right?
Yep. Mixes everything up. And it's this mixing that eventually leads to the embryo sac.
So that's where the fertilization action happens.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our pollen packed and ready to go and our embryo sac all prepped. But how do they actually get together? This is where pollination comes in, right?
You got it.
So lay it on me. How do plants,
Get it on.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. Some plants rely on the wind, others use water, and then there's the whole world of biotic pollinators.
Biotic pollinators. Okay, you're going to have to break that one down for me.
Right, so biotic pollinators are animals.
Animals.
Yeah, insects, birds, even some bats. They've evolved these fascinating relationships with flowering plants.
So they're like the plant world's matchmakers.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. But going back to what you're saying about wind and water for a sec, how does that even work?
Well, with wind pollination, it's kind of like a botanical lottery,
Just throw it out there and hope for the best.
pretty much. But plants that rely on wind, like grasses and a lot of trees, they produce these massive amounts of pollen. It's lightweight, aerodynamic. And then when it comes to water pollination, think seagrasses, those kinds of plants. They use the currents to carry their pollen to other plants.
Clever. It's amazing how adaptable plants are when you really think about it. But you were saying something about animals helping out too. Tell me more about those biotic pollinators.
Right. So basically, these animals, they visit flowers to get nectar or pollen, for food. And in the process, they pick up some of that sticky pollen and carry it to other flowers. It's a win-win.
So the pollinators get a meal and the plants get to reproduce. Everyone's happy.
Exactly. And these relationships, they can get surprisingly complex. Like you've got the bee orchid, right?
Right.
It's evolved to look and even smell like a female bee. And it does this to attract male bees who try to mate with it.
No way. That's like plant trickery at its finest.
It's incredible how evolution comes up with this stuff. So, okay, let's say pollination is successful and a pollen grain makes it to the embryo sac. What happens then?
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. Flowering plants, they have this unique process called double fertilization.
Double fertilization. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So first, the pollen grain grows a tube, kind of like a tunnel, down the style of the flower to the ovary where the embryo sac is.
So it's like delivering its precious cargo.
Exactly. It's carrying the male gametes. One of those gametes fuses with the egg cell in the embryo sac.
Okay, so that's fertilization as we usually think about it, right?
Yeah.
Sperm meets egg.
Right. And that fusion, it creates the zygote, which develops into the embryo, the baby plant.
Got it. But you said double fertilization. What about the second part?
Okay, so this is what's really cool. The other male gamete, it fuses with not one, but two polar nuclei in the embryo sac.
Two. Wait, what are polynuclei? I don't think we talk about those. Oh, right. So basically, there are these other cells in the embryo sac that, well, they play a crucial role in this whole process.
Okay. And when the second male gamete fuses with them,
It forms the endosperm.
endosperm, isn't that, it rings a bell, but remind me, what is that again?
Endosperm is basically like a packed lunch for the developing embryo. It's full of nutrients.
Oh, that's right. It's like a little energy bar for the baby plant. So double fertilization, it's like this incredible 2-for-1 deal. You get the embryo and its food supply all in one go. Plants are so efficient.
I know. It's pretty amazing.
It really is. Okay, so we have our fertilized ovule. What happens next?
Well, the fertilized ovule, it starts to develop into a seed.
Hmm?
And at the same time, the ovary, which surrounds the ovule, it starts to develop into the fruit.
Hold on. So when I'm eating an apple, I'm actually eating the plant's ovary.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's kind of mind-blowing. And a little weird, but mostly mind-blowing.
And there's more. Some fruits, they can develop without fertilization.
Wait, really? What? No fertilization needed? How does that work?
It's called parthenocarpy. Bananas are a good example. They develop without pollination or fertilization, which is why they don't have seeds.
Wow, so bananas have just bypassed the whole system. That's incredible.
Plants are full of surprises, right?
They really are. So we've talked about pollination, fertilization, fruits, and seeds. It's been quite a journey. But the text also mentions something about apomixis and polyembryony. Those sound a little intense, even for me. What are those all about?
So apomixis, it's basically a way for plants to produce seeds without fertilization. It's like a shortcut in the whole reproduction process.
So they can reproduce asexually through seeds.
Exactly.
That's amazing. What's the advantage of that?
Well, it lets them reproduce really quickly and efficiently, especially in environments where pollinators might be scarce.
Ah, so it's like a backup plan.
Exactly.
And what about polyembryony?
So polyembryony is when a single seed has multiple embryos.
Wait, so multiple baby plants in one seed?
Yep. Like if you've ever sprouted citrus seeds at home, you might have noticed that sometimes you get 2 or more seedlings from a single seed.
Oh, yeah. I always thought that was strange. So that's polyembryony in action.
That's it.
Wow, we've covered so much ground. From the basics of how flowers are structured to these crazy, complex reproductive strategies. It's amazing how diverse the plant world is.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn.
That's what makes these deep dives so fun, though. So out of everything we've discussed today, what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
I think the biggest thing to remember is that plant reproduction, it's way more complicated and way more fascinating than we often give it credit for. From how flowers are designed to all the different ways plants have evolved to make sure they get pollinated and their seeds get dispersed, it's just incredible.
I totally agree. It makes you appreciate the power of evolution.
Absolutely.
But before we get too existential, you were about to say something about the evolutionary advantages of flowering plants.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And this is a big one. Flowering plants, they're really the success story of the plant world, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, they're pretty much everywhere.
Exactly. And a lot of that success comes down to, you guessed it, their reproductive strategies.
Okay, so what is it about these strategies that gives them such an edge? You got me curious now.
Well, let's start with double fertilization. Talk about efficiency. No wasting resources on seeds that might not even sprout.
Makes sense.
And then there's that built-in food supply, the endosperm. It gives the developing seedling a major advantage right from the start.
Like packing a lunch before a big trip. Smart.
Exactly. Plus, think about how many different ways flowering plants have evolved to get pollinated. Wind, water, animals, they've got it all covered.
It's like they've adapted to every possible scenario.
Right. They're not putting all their eggs in one basket, that's for sure. And then, on top of all that, you have those more specialized adaptations like apomixis and polyembryony. Those strategies, they're not as common, but they provide huge advantages in certain situations.
It's kind of mind-blowing how many different ways plants have evolved to, well, make more plants.
It really is. And the more we learn about them, the more amazing they seem.
I couldn't agree more. So, to sum it all up for our listeners, we've journeyed through the ins and outs of plant reproduction, from the beauty of flowers to the incredible adaptations for pollination and making sure seeds get spread far and wide.
We've even touched on some of the more unusual tricks plants have up their sleeves, like apomixis and polyembryony.
And we've seen how all of these incredible strategies have allowed flowering plants to become one of the most successful groups of organisms on Earth.
Truly remarkable.
Absolutely. But I think it's safe to say that this deep dive has left us with even more questions than answers, wouldn't you say?
Always the case, isn't it?
That's the beauty of learning, I guess. There's always more to explore. But for now, we're going to have to leave it there. Until next time, keep those brains blooming.